Oh, fantastic. Hello, ladies. How are you all today? I hope you're having.
Yeah, really good.
Good, thank you.
Good,
Good.
thank you.
So, I'm going to talk to you today about the SHR or in motion or the technique or whatever you want to call it. The first thing you need to understand it's a technique. It's not a technology. All right. So, if you've got a diode or an IPL system, you can use this technique just as you can use the stamping technique. All right. So, some people they think that SHR is a particular type of device, and it's not really. So this is called super hair removal, which is really just a bit of a silly name. I don't know who came up with this because there's nothing super about it. It's just hair removal. It's also known as glide and slide or in motion or whatever your supplier calls it. They all get slightly different names. But basically, the whole idea of this motion back and forth, etc., is you're trying to build up heat gradually in the area you're treating. So if you're using the conventional stamping technique, you're just firing one pulse of energy in one area and moving on to the next and firing one pulse and then the next and so on and so forth. But with this method, you're building up the heat in the dermis and in the follicles over a much longer period using a lower fluence. So the way I like to think of this is that with stamping technique, it's a bit like one of these old-fashioned steam presses that used to get in hotels and the like. So you put in your shirt or your blouse or your trousers, whatever, and you go, and one stamp was enough. That was it, ironed. Whereas at home, we don't do that. We use these devices, which is much more like your SHR. So you're gliding back and forward over your article of clothing, which in this case looks to be that is pajamas. Not sure. That's kind of what we're the difference here between SHR and stamping, and you get the same result at the end of the day, but just as a different way routes to get there. So when you're doing the SHR, when the original research was done a few years ago, they mapped out an area like this, a 10 by 10 centimeter square, and they basically said, right, okay, let's apply the energy. Just checking. Let's apply the energy in this square, and they went back and forth a few times up and down the square until they delivered a certain amount of energy in total. They actually used 3,200 joules, they say. I don't believe them because that's kind of a weird number, but that's what they say. So what you do is you separate this into strips like this, 10 centimeters by 1 centimeter. And there are obviously there are 10 of these strips. So the idea is that you set your machine up. I'll show you in a wee second how we do that. And you go up, down, up, down, up, down. And you stay in that strip because what you want to do is build up the temperature in that area, that 10 by 1 centimeter square centimeter area. You want to build it up so that the dermis and the follicles temperatures all rise. Once you've done that area, you then go down to the next 10 by 1 strip, you do that area, and then the next one, 10 by 1. So what you don't do is a kind of haphazard thing like this, where you're all over the place, and that's pointless because you're not going to build up enough energy doing it. The idea of this is that you start here, move to there, stop, come back. And then that way, when you're moving back and forward, the heat that you've already deposited in here and here and here is still retained to a certain extent. So there's still some heat by the time you get back. And by the time you get back there, there's still some heat there, and by the time you get back there. So the heat, although the heat is dissipating or conducting away from this strip, you still get enough retained heat so the temperature keeps rising. And that's critical because if you don't do the scanning properly, it's just not going to happen. So here's a wee video, what I made with my daughter. I think that's her leg actually, using the technique. I'm using a black pen here because I don't have a white one. So, so here I'm mapping out a 10 by 10 square centimeter area roughly. And then you got a wee bit of gel because we're going to pre-cool it. So this is important because if you don't cool it, it's going to sting if you're using the right amount of energy. It just will, unfortunately. If you pre-cool it, then it helps to take away a lot of that sting and makes it just more comfortable overall. And as you know, I love these cool packs because it is so good. So then that's the area's pre-cool for about, I think it was about 3 or 4 minutes in that case. And then you flash the, this is an IPL. You see what I'm doing? I'm staying in the same strip. I'm not moving out of that strip. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And then I put the ice back on again, and then I do the second strip. You can already see the erythema in the strip that I've done. It's beginning to come up. And again, do the second strip. A bit more cooling. And you can see the whole area is beginning to turn red now, which is a good sign. Now, in this case, I only had to do 3 strips because the IPL head is 3 centimeters in length. So if you're going to do a 10 by 10, then you only need 3 to cover that. That'll be 10 by 9, I suppose. You only need to do it 3 times, and that's you done a large area. But the point is that by remaining scanning the same strip, the heat is going to build up gradually. What you want. What you don't want to do is this. This is what I see all the time on the internet. People doing this big, long kind of motion. And the problem with this is that by the time you get back to the original area, a lot of that heat will have dissipated and conducted into the surrounding tissue. And if you don't do it the right timing, then you're pretty much wasting your time here, because you're allowing way too much time for it all to cool down. I mean, that area is probably that's about 30 centimeters, something maybe slightly longer than 30 centimeters. You really want to focus on an area that size, keep it that way, and then that way the heat will not all disappear before you come. So that's
I half a bottom leg, so I do it in 2, the bottom of a leg.
Well, even that might be too long, because if you've got somebody who's longer legs, then
yeah, true.
Long as a leg. My legs reach all the way around, fortunately. So this is not a good technique, because and this is where people go wrong, because they do this and then they have problems with hairs growing back, and they come back finer and thinner. If you saw my blog yesterday, you'll understand why that happens then. So what we're trying to do with this technique, trying to accumulate heat before it all disappears into the surrounding tissues or into the air. You want to accumulate it in the area, and you have to deliver the correct amount of total energy. Now, this is actually quite interesting. I only realized this a couple of weeks ago when I went down to Smart Group in Bracknell. They invited me down because they'd seen all my blogs and such, and they thought, maybe we should speak to this guy. So I went down there, had a look at the machine. I've got to say, I thought the machine was very nice. It was a good laser. But I sat there with Ian, the director, and Amy, the trainer, and talked about all this kind of stuff. And we realized that there was a better way of doing this. When you are delivering this total energy, let's keep realizing this total word. You used to talk about this as kilojoules or kg. Okay, this is actually quite important. The total energy, when you're delivering this energy using the SHR technique, the total energy that you deliver into the skin is the fluence that you set on the machine times the repetition rate, which is your hertz, so that's the number of shots per second, times the number of passes. So what you can do is you can set a fluence, let's say 10 joules a square centimeter. You can set a repetition rate of say 5 hertz, and then you do, let's say, 5 passes. So that's 10 times 5 times 5. That's what 250 joules altogether. That's not a lot, to be honest. That's too low. So you need to do more than that. I'll show you the table in a second just to explain it. So when you do this, when you set up, you set your machine to some fluence, you set the repetition rate, your hertz on the machine, and then you choose the number of passes that you want to deliver to this area. If we assume that you want to deliver a total amount of 4,500 joules into a 10 by 10 area, then this is what you would come up with. A fluence of 15 joules per square centimeter at 6 hertz, and you need to do 5 passes, right? Because what this means is that you're firing 6 shots every second, and you're doing that in over a 10 centimeter strip. And if you do 5 passes, it means that you're delivering 450 joules in that one strip. Right? That's what's actually being delivered, which over the full area, 10 by 10, means it's 4,500 joules. You're doing 10 strips like that, right? So this is the way to think of this for SHR, whether it's diode or IPL. You bring your your joules per square centimeter, your fluence, you set your rep rates, 6 hertz or whatever you want, and you do a certain number of passes. And what we realized when we're down there, if you're doing this on skin tones 1 to 4, which a lot of people call Fitzpatrick, but I didn't. If you do like a lighter color skin, then you can deliver 4,500 joules using these 3 numbers. If it's a darker skin, then you want to use a lower fluence, because the darker skin is going to cause more pain because the skin's darker in the epidermis. You use the same rep rate, but now instead of doing 5 passes, you do 1 extra pass at this lower fluence. You're still going to get about just under 4,500 joules. So that's fine. I mean, only 180 joules different, that's nothing. If it's even darker skin, then you want to use a lower fluence, because again, you don't want to damage the epidermis or cause pain. And then you'll do, I put 7.5 passes, so you probably do 7 or 8, one of those 2. And again, you get the total amount of energy. So what I realized was, what we're trying to do is keep this number to a certain value, so that the hairs will be completely destroyed. And the way this works is, the more energy you throw into the skin, the higher the temperature in the hair follicle, and therefore the more likely it's going to be permanently destroyed. So,
Mike, sorry, can I ask a question? Does it matter whether you do it over 10 passes or if you just did it over 3 passes like you did on Lisa's leg? It still builds up the same amount of energy? Or do you have to do 10 strips?
No, it matters, because what you have to do is get this number, the fluence, the rep rate, and the passes, number of passes, so that it adds up to something like this. Now, pieces like that was just an example. I wasn't doing obviously a proper treatment, so that was just to explain the technique rather than a proper treatment as such.
Yeah.
So if you are doing a real life person, then I would recommend you do something like this. Now, the reason I chose 6 hertz was because when I was playing with their machine, I realized that they normally recommend 10 hertz, but I realized that 10 hertz is actually quite hard to control. You know, human beings we just don't think that fast, and we don't react that fast. 10 hertz means you're firing a shot every 10th of a second, and our brains are not designed to think that quickly. So I played about with the machine for a while, and I realized that at 6 hertz, I could control it much better. So what I recommend is you do something likewise. Do 5 or 6 hertz, something like that, whatever you're comfortable with. But I just found that once you went above 6, it began to run away from me, and it was just hard to control. Okay, so you choose your hertz, and then you just do the same multiplication. You multiply the fluence by the hertz, and then the number of passes to get something like 4,500 joules. Now, when they did the original research on this all those years, it was Alma did this research. They only delivered 3,200 joules, and they claim that they got good results with that. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't really know, to be honest with you. So I figured that when I tried it on myself, and I was at myself with 3,000 odd joules, and I thought, I don't really feel anything. So I upped the fluence a bit more, until eventually I got to a point where I could feel it. And what I noticed was I could do 1, 2, 3, 4 passes at 15 joules, and I didn't really feel anything. When I did the 5th pass, I felt a nip, and that kind of in my head I thought, all right, okay, we've hit some kind of a limit here. So that's how we come up with this data. And when I did the calculations, it comes up with 4,500 joules. So that's a wee bit more than the original Alma paper. So I suspect that the real figure is somewhere between about 3,000, 4,500 joules in total, something like that. I'm not sure exactly what, but do you know what? It probably varies from person to person and such nice. But this is basically how we do it. You multiply your fluence by the rep rate, by the number of passes, and you're going for 450 in this case. Let me just double check. What's that? Yeah, that's 400. So 15 times 6 is 90, times 5 is 450. So in one strip, you're delivering 400 joules, and then over all 10 strips, it's 4,500. Now, don't worry if it's a bit more or a bit less, because I noticed that on the smart diode system, in the handle, it tells you the total number of joules, and it just jumps and jumps and jumps. It jumps up by like about 120, 150 joules a pop. So, sometimes I would only deliver 4,000. Sometimes it's nearer 5,000. But it's no big deal. as long as you're in that kind of zone, then you should be okay. Right?
Mike, can I ask you a question, please? So you've got your fluence joules per centimetre squared. Now, I'm a W3 alumni here, and we don't work in joules per centimetre squared. We just work in joules.
I'm not sure that's true. Claire Louise can help you because you've also got the AW3 machine. I can't remember. Does it stick out joules per square centimeter or joules directly? I can't remember.
Wait one, hold the line, please, caller.
I can hear voices. This is a slight unfortunate thing. If your machine doesn't give you the fluence numbers, then this is going to be tricky for sure, unless you get it calibrated. Right? Calibration basically means that the numbers coming out of the machine make sense. That's what calibration does. Okay, so ideally, I mean, to be honest with you, you really do want joules per square centimeter, because imagine driving your car along the road and it doesn't tell you what the speed is in miles per hour. It tells you in I don't know, furlongs per year.
I know it's definitely not per centimetre squared because I don't work as low as 15, 12 and 10. It's always like 100, 80, 90. And it just says joules on the machines. It doesn't say joules per square centimetre. And when I've spoken to them, they've actually said the machines are just joules, not joules per square centimetre.
Mine says joules per square centimetre.
Is that IPL, Claire?
Yes, it is.
This is diode or Alex or 1064.
No. Then in that case, you might be right. The same with the smart diodes. And on the handle, they've got a little LED display on the back of the actual handle, and it tells you just the joules, but it jumps up pretty rapidly. So, and it's counting the joules. That's exactly what it's doing. Every time it fires a shot, if you got say you set your machine to 15 joules square centimeter, and you've got a 1 square centimeter output on your handpiece, then it means every time you fire a shot, it's delivering 15 joules, right? If you're firing at 6 hertz, so that's 6 shots every second, then you're going to be delivering 15 times 6, that's 90 joules every second. Okay, so maybe that's what the AW3 machines do. I don't know. I need to have a look at it because I'm not seeing their diode system. So, but it sounds like they might be. Yeah, you're right. Telling the actual joules.
So
I mean, that's low fluence compared to what I use, and I know it's IPL, and most of you girls work with diode, but I that's very low fluence. I'm normally up in the 20s easily.
Are you doing a stamping?
No.
You're doing a sliding?
Yeah.
And what sort of repetition rate?
Well, I've had it on 5 actually.
Yeah. What kind of fluence?
But 21, 22.
Okay, so you're
go much higher with underarms, like 30.
Okay, so that's 150 joules per second. You're doing. You could do that in 3 passes, and you would get the same total number of joules, 450.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
So just going back to the joules per square centimetre, Mike, can you just tell me the calculation I would need to do to work out the joules per...
Look at the end of your handpiece that actually contacts. Work out what the area of that is. Now, it's in the manual or in your spec. It'll be something like it could be, the smart diode system. It was 1 times 1.2 centimeters.
Yeah.
So that makes it a 1.2 square centimeter area. Now it just depends on your machine, because some machines they have a larger output, so it might be 1 by 2 centimeters. That's a 2 square centimeter small size. It just depends on the individual devices.
Yeah.
And
so yeah, go on. Sorry.
Work out the area. You take the 1 times whatever, and you divide it into your number of joules. So if it's 100 joules, 150 joules, so that'd be 100 divided by that area, and that'll tell you what the fluence is.
Okay, thank you.
Now the other thing I noticed is pain control. We all have a bit of pain, as you know. Some people pay good money for that kind of stuff. And what I know it's all about the number of passes. So, like when I did this to myself, when I did this to myself, it was 20 joules, not 15, because I was a bit drunk and I thought, I can take the 20, 6 hertz, and And I did 4 passes, I didn't feel anything, and on the 5th pass, I felt the pain. So that's when I kind of realized, well, okay, to control the pain, you alter the number of passes. If somebody is wincing and whining and greeting and all the rest of it, then just do 1 less pass, and you're probably find to be all right. Keep the fluence, because the fluence is what determines the results, the success rates. If the fluence is too low and you're not getting enough energy into it, then it's never going to work.
Mike, could I ask a question, please? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Sorry. What was I going to say? So do you think that actually builds enough heat? So disregarding the actual total number of joules that you're putting into the area, do you still think that using a low fluence like that and passing it over a number of times, do you still think that does build enough heat? Because I've used the SHR technique with Smart, and it does get them at that last second, but is that last pass being hot enough? Is that enough? Does that make sense?
It seems to be, yeah. Because when I read the original ALMA paper, I was a bit skeptical. I thought, well, I'm not sure this is going to work, because it seems to me it was too low. But the reason they did this, the reason they came up with this technique, was to try to eliminate the pain. Is stamping is painful, but then I've got to say, in those days they weren't using any ice cooling, so that was their mistake. So if you use ice cooling, then the pain is much less. But the reason they did this in the first place was trying to reduce the amount of pain, and they figured we'll use a lower fluence, because fluence is what causes the pain in the epidermis, but we'll go over it a number of times, like this, 5 or 6 times, or 7 or 8 times, whatever. But it's interesting, because in their paper, they say, yeah, we appear to be getting good results, which is nice. And they said, but we think what's happening is that we're adding in all this energy, and it's all building up, and it's raising the temperature of the dermis, even by a few degrees. And I remember thinking that, oh, maybe that's the crucial thing then. So I did some calculations, and sure enough, even if you raise the dermis temperature by only about 4 or 5 degrees, that makes a big difference, surprisingly. I was quite really quite shocked when I saw that, because I didn't expect that, and yet the numbers bear fruits. They do seem to make a difference. And they were using, like I say, I'm talking about 4,500 or thereabouts joules. They were only using just over 3,000 joules. I think if we go for this level of energy, total energy, I think your chances of success are even higher than they reckon.
Okay.
Mike, I've also got a question. So I'm a Smart diode as well. And we've been given these like laminated sheets and stuff as a guide sort of to follow, but they never start with a fluence sort of higher than like a 10, 12 on like your first treatment. Yeah. So you've obviously put 15 there, but we were also told to just up that by 2 each treatment.
Yeah. They'll soon tell you not to do that anymore, because I told them that was nonsense. This is, I don't know where that came from. This is a bizarre thing. Started a few years ago. People were suggesting, yeah, you start in this at this point, and the next time you add an extra 2, and the next time an extra. That's pointless. Utterly pointless.
I always wondered what the point of that was, because if it was effective on the first treatment at low fluence, why bother upping it?
Precisely. Yeah. It's a crazy idea. I don't know. For tattoos, absolutely yes, that's what you do for tattoos, but not for hair. For hair, you want to get in there and try and kill as many follicles as you can every time. The problem is, if you start with a low fluence, like 10, and you're only doing that stamping type motion, you're only going to kill the most superficial hair. So you're not going to get anywhere near the deeper hair. So you just won't. There's not enough energy. And the energy won't get down there. So
you think like starting with 15 is, and you stick with 15 sort of all the way through their treatment?
If you do this, then what you have to think about is, it's not like the stamping. Forget the stamping process here. We're thinking here, you're adding 15 joules, but you're adding it multiple times, right? Not just you're adding it many times in the whole area. You're going to do what, 6 times? So let's say 6. That's 30 times 1 point. I can't do the numbers now. 50. Well, yeah, well over 100 shots, right? Easily. So the energy is building and building and building all the time. All right, that's the difference. If you, the stamping technique, you're just going bam, one shot and then moving on. But this one, you're gradually building it. And so even at such a low fluence, like 12, 15 or whatever, which is to me that's low as well. But I'm used to the stamping method. But even at such low fluences, you're still going to build up the total energy at the end of the day. And that's what's important. Right.
And with the smart diode, for the face, they actually recommend that you do the stamping method. So you can talk the slide and glide for the rest of the body, but then with the face, just to do static shots.
I think that's a comfort thing, isn't it? Like an ease of area, is it, more than anything?
Small area, that's the problem. So I mean, unless you can go, which
with smart
that flashing light, that constant flashing light is actually quite hard on the face, really, for people. I've had a couple of clients and I've had to change to stamping. I do it sometimes, so starting from the chin, the cheek, and working down and up, sort of like that, or doing it in 2 parts. But sometimes the constant flash is a bit much.
Think of it this way: the whole point of this technique, SHR, is so you can cover sort of fairly big areas like legs or backs or arms or chest. But for small areas, or even armpits, but for small areas like upper lip, it doesn't kind of make sense, does it? You can't really scan over the upper lip. There's just not enough space.
Yeah.
So yeah, for small areas, definitely use the stamping technique. Right. So by doing this, what you're doing is, by keeping those numbers at that kind of level, you're ensuring you're going to deliver the correct amount of total energy. It means you're not guessing anymore. That's the whole point of this. If you say to yourself, right, okay, I know I need to deliver 4,500 joules in this 10 by 10 area, doesn't matter which part of the body, then by using these kind of numbers, you're saying, well, I know I've got zap, 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 zap. I know I've delivered the right amount of energy, and I know from the science that should then kill most of the hairs. All right, so this takes the guesswork out of it. Now, in some machines, not all, unfortunately, but in some machines, it will tell you the total number of joules. So it makes it easier. You can actually see on your machine. And other machines like IPLs, for example, don't do this. You're going to have to rely on your own abilities to set the machine and hertz and then count. I got to say, when I first did this and some poor engineer did it smart, I was only going to do 3 passes, but I did 3 double passes. 1, 2, 3. So I did 6 passes altogether. And he kind of wept a bit. Oh, that was a bit sore. And I thought, oh, and he had a big bump. Yeah, you know, engineers. Right. Anyway, so that just books. You all know, get the books out there. Seminar. If you want to come along to this in Liverpool, I'll be coming down there to Emma's place in Liverpool on Monday, 15th of May. I'm just going to talk about hair removal, nothing else. Okay, and I'm going to talk about this technique and demonstrate it with her machine down there. If you want to come along to that, please email me and let me know, and we'll put that all together. And that's in May. And then I've got a masterclass coming up in Manchester in the Buddy Village Hotel. If you want to come to that again, just email. Right. So questions. Let's do this now. I've got 12 minutes left. Fire away. Okay, no questions. Fantastic. That's good, isn't it?
Mike, I want more information around the difference between the joules per centimetre on the diode and the joules per centimetre square on the IPL. Why is that happening, and how is that different?
Right. Okay. What you find is it all comes down to the manufacturers. Some manufacturers will build particularly diode systems where you've got a 1 square centimetre window that touches the skin. That's it. That's the out. Okay, and that's just purely because of the manufacturing, the engineers, and what have you. That they've opted for that particular size. You tend to find though that IPLs is a much longer glass tip, because with IPL you've got a flash lamp. It's a bulb. The bulb, a long thin thing, and you just stick in a bit of glass or quartz or whatever to take the energy from the bulb. So they tend to be maybe 3 or maybe 2.5 or 4 centimeters long, but only about 1 centimeter wide, typically. Right. So the area is just, one side multiplied by the other side. It's a rectangle or a square. So it could be 3 by 1 or 2 by 1 or 1 by 1, whatever. square centimeters. So once you know that, that gives you the area that's actually impacting on the skin surface. All right. So once you know that, if your machine is telling you joules, I can't remember, one of you asked me a question earlier on, is telling the number of joules, then you look at the number of joules and you divide it by that area that's touching the skin, and that gives you the joules per square centimeter, which is your fluence. All right, that's telling what the fluence is. Other machines will tell you that on the screen. Right, they'll say click, 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 20, 30, 40, whatever joules per square centimeter. So that you then have to assume that that's what's coming out and actually hitting the skin. Quite often it's not, unfortunately. Quite often it's less than that, but we have to assume that for these purposes. So it really depends what your machine's telling you. But if it's not giving you all the information, then please go back to your manufacturer, your supplier, and say, okay, how do I find this particular number? I need to know the fluence. I can set the hertz myself, and I can control the number of passes. And by doing that, you then know exactly how much energy, total energy, you're delivering. And if it's a wee strip, 10 by 1 strip, you're aiming for about 450 joules in that one strip, and then times 10 strips. Okay? Now, the thing to do is, once you've done that, stick the cooling back, like you saw in my video, stick the ice pack back on, and that'll take out any excess heat, because there's always excess heat in these things. That'll draw that excess heat out and take away any chances of unwanted damage and reduce the pain situation as well.
So for clients that have been getting good results to start with, and then it's slowed down, or like some people say that they think the hair is actually coming back, is that because with the diode we've been taught to go up to such a high energy setting that it's actually not, like, by upping it by 2 each time?
This all comes down to energy. That's the bottom line. All right, it's an energy thing. So I'm trying to get this bloody thing to show. The more energy you use, the more success you'll get in your results. It's as simple as that, right? So
pain energy payoff, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, the more energy you fire in, the more pain you're going to generate, because the epidermis is going to absorb some of that energy. That's what generates the pain. So the higher the energy, the higher the fluence you throw into the skin, the more energy is going to be absorbed in the epidermis, and the more pain it's going to cause. That's why you have to pre-cool the epidermis. You want to take the temperature of the epidermis right down, lose 15, 20 degrees Celsius in the epidermis, and then the amount of pain will be much, much less. But yeah, you do want to make sure you've got plenty of energy going into the hair, because that's where the success comes in. Now, this is where there's a big problem out there where machines, if you click on your machine fits 4, for example, then it automatically reduces the fluence. They all do this, and they're all wrong, because what you have to think about is this. You say, I want to kill this hair. This hair is dark, but it's at some depth. So, you know, let's say it's bikini hair, so it's quite deep hair. Then you're going to say, to kill a deep hair, I need to use a high fluence, if you're using the stamping technique, right? So I need to use a high fluence, but this person got quite dark skin. So I'm going to reduce the fluence. Why? That's crazy. By reducing the fluence, you're reducing your chance of success. What you should do is you should do more cooling on the skin to take away the potential for pain and damage in the epidermis. So if somebody's got darker skin, that means more cooling. That's what it means. Doesn't mean reduce the fluence.
So that diagram that you put up at the beginning with the reduced fluence for the darker Fitzpatrick type.
Yes.
I did wonder when you put that up, because I know that you've said before the Fitzpatrick type of the skin doesn't really make a difference to the fluence you're using. You just use more cooling. So would you still reduce the fluence, or would you not?
What I realized was that for darker skin tones like 5 and 6, okay, you can reduce the fluence here, but you have a number of passes to compensate.
Okay.
Right? So by reducing the fluence in the individual pulses, you will reduce the pain level. You just will, because you're not going to heat up the epidermis so much. But because you're scanning back and forward across the area, by the time you get back to the original area, some of that heat will have dissipated. So there's less of inducing pain in them. You see? So that's why I was saying for this Oops, there's a. Yeah. That's why I'm saying the pain control comes in the number of passes. You want to use these kind of figures for the fluids, but you can control the pain with both with ice cooling and the number of passes. Now, the only problem is though, say you're doing a type 5 person at 12 joules, you do 6 passes and they say, oh my God, that's far too painful. Well, what you want to do is stick more ice on them and cool them a little bit longer. And if they still can't tolerate 6 passes, then okay, drop it to 5. Do 5 passes, and you'll probably find that they can tolerate that. But still use ice. Now, what that means though is your total energy is going to be a little bit less. But hopefully you've still got enough energy in there to do the job properly.
So, I mean, pain isn't really my main concern for people because I'm horrible, but it's the fact like of giving them actual burns.
Right, everybody, don't go to Katie's. Horrible. She's admitted it live on air. Do you know something? It's quite funny that I have noticed that places that induce a lot of pain, they tend to get the best results.
That's what I keep telling my clients. So,
hey, you asked about the hair growth and feeling like it's coming back, etc., etc. I think that's down to just hair growth cycles rather than you not using the correct energy. Because very often I have clients, and I warn them about it now, that come back on or around session 4 or 5 and say, feels a bit like there's loads of hair growing back, and I just put it down to that just being a big new batch of hair that's coming through, that we are, yay, good, it's here, which means we can kill it. Do you know what I mean?
There's two, right? First of all, no matter how good you are at this technique, no matter what machine you're using or whether it's SHR or stamping, you'll most likely never be more than about 60% efficient. All right. That means that every time you tackle an area, you're only going to kill about 60% of the anagen follicles. So that means about 40% are untouched for one reason or another. Okay. So when that person comes back for the subsequent treatment, those 40% that you didn't kill, some of those are going to be back in anagen, some will be in telogen and catagen, but some will be back in anagen. You can have a whole bunch of new anagen, which were in catagen telogen previously, and you're going to have some follicles which you didn't quite kill, maybe stunned or whatever, and some of those will start to grow through as well with finer, lighter coloured hairs. So you get 3 different batches of hair there. So, some of it's brand new growth because the previous occasion they were all in telogen, whatever. Some of it is not quite regrowth, but it's hair which you didn't kill, you missed altogether the first time around, and some of it is regrowth, where you've partly killed the follicle, you've killed some of the germ cells, but the follicle survived and it's now come out with a finer hair. So yeah, it's actually very difficult to know when somebody comes back and they've got all this hair sitting there. It's difficult to know which is which. You can't really differentiate except for the finer hairs. Finer hair, then that kind of tells you haven't used enough energy, enough fluids. That was my posted a blog up yesterday to explain that exact situation. Why do we get finer, lighter coloured hair coming through after treatments? And it's because you're killing a certain percentage of the germ cells. The remaining germ cells will revive that particular follicle, but because of fewer, as a smaller amount of germ cells, the follicle will be smaller and the hair's finer. Finer hairs are.
Mike, did you speak to Josh and Ian about their treatment intervals? Because their intervals are really close together.
Yeah, and I explained a lot to them as well, and they agreed.
Yeah, I've spoken to Ian before, and I said this to him. I was like, they're too close together, and he's like, well, if they've got no hair, then obviously you don't treat them. So wait until they've got some hair growth.
Exactly. I spoke to an American dermatologist last year, and he had an interesting concept. He said what they do is they treat all their clients maybe 2 or 3 times, and then they send them away and say, don't come back until you've got some hair to treat. So they don't actually say, yeah, come back in 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 10 weeks. They don't say that. They say, come back when you get enough hair to treat.
That's how I've been working, really. I've been sort of led by them because everybody's growth is different. Everybody grows at a different rate naturally. So
it makes sense. It does make a lot of sense. So
I know a lot of people had a lot of complaints about Smart, saying that, oh, you know, all the hair's growing back, but they've literally been doing a course of 6 treatments in 6 months.
Which far
It's
too
way too quick.
Yeah.
And they've been SHRing all over the place willy-nilly and not gridding out. And
now,
A lot of that's probably down to the training, maybe. I don't think that's been up to scratch and their protocols.
yeah,
yeah,
Massive work needs to be done there. Massive. I don't think that's the technician's fault. I think it's probably the way they've been trained and taught, and that probably is down to Smart. That's their error.
yes. But I think that they're going to be writing to all their customers and suggesting some new protocols. They've already said to me, "Can I come back and train their trainers?"
I think that's a massive step that needs to happen.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah. Massive step forward.
I mean, you only have to talk to clients. When I show clients, I do a little PowerPoint patch test to show how it works and why I do what I do. And you only have to point out how you are able to grow your hair long on your head,
yeah.
but you would never be able to grow it the same length on your legs for the light bulb to go on and them to go, oh yeah, okay, I get that, you know?
I always compare that for them, because it does help them to understand. Definitely.
Why don't companies see that though? Why can't they realise that there's such a difference in hair growth and length of time?
They don't. They just don't get
It's
that.
not a good business model, that's why. To sell a machine and say you only get payment every 8 weeks instead of 4.
Upper lip. I mean, the hair in the upper lip grows for a few weeks, maybe 6 weeks or something like that, I think. Whereas the hair on my chin can grow for up to a year. That's why, if I was so inclined, I could grow a beard that could reach all the way down to my toes.
Easy to.
Gosh, or your eyebrows. Imagine your eyebrows. Imagine they kept growing for a year. You'd be constantly doing this.
So what are you saying are the optimum times? Because again, with Smart, we've been told like 4 to 6 weeks for everything.
Right, okay, to be honest with you, what I found was that it's quite simple actually. The gap you leave between the treatment sessions will determine how many treatment sessions you need overall. Right, that's the way it works. So if you have a long gap, let's say you leave. Let's say if we're talking, say you leave 3 months. I'm not suggesting you do, but let's say you leave 3 months. Then that means that every single time they come back, there's going to be lots of hairs in anagen. And so you kill 60% of those, send them away, come back 3 months later, and pretty much all the hairs that can be in anagen probably will be at that point. Right? That's not practical. If you only treat them, if you treat them all at 4-week intervals, then a lot of the hairs will not be back in anagen. So right away, you've lost your efficiency. The efficiency drops because a lot of the hairs will still be in catagen or telogen, and you can't kill them.
I've put the link to your blog in the chat on that.
Say that again?
Popped the link for your blog in the chat for that topic.
My blog is mikemurphyblog.com.
Yeah, I've put the link in there.
Magic. Thank you. So the reality is, what I found was a good compromise is about 8 weeks. If you leave about 8 weeks between pretty much any body area, then it reduces the total number of treatments to around between 6, 7, or 8, something like that. Yeah? But it really is up to you, and you know, it's partly a business decision as well. You know, you may decide, no, 8 weeks is too long, 6 weeks is better. If you decide to go for 6 weeks, it just means you probably need an extra 2 or 3 sessions overall. That's no big deal. Nobody's really going to complain about that. If you take it down to 4-week intervals,
Well, they will, because they've got to pay for it.
well, yeah.
So, you know, there's that balance again. You know, I want to leave as long as possible between sessions, and then in that way you pay for less sessions and I get you hair free in less sessions.
And then they tell all their friends.
They love that.
Is there a time where it's too long to leave between sessions?
No, not really.
Oh.
Right.
So if someone fell pregnant, in theory, you've already killed hair follicles.
Yes.
So they're not going to come back. You just need to then carry on killing the ones you haven't killed after
you kill those,
they've finished having babies.
gone forever. All right. Now I've seen people saying, "Oh yeah, if you leave too long, then all the hair comes back." No, it doesn't all come back. That's other hair. There's different follicles. So you need to be careful. I mentioned this previously. You need to be careful with your choice of language when you're talking to your clients. you know, regrowth is not the same as new growth. New growth comes from follicles that you didn't kill previously, or follicles that weren't in anagen previously. That's what new.
I mean, in terms of, obviously, when the next set of hairs are in anagen, at what point do they then go into catagen? Like, that's what I mean in terms of waiting too long.
Who knows?
But there will always be some hairs in anagen, so it doesn't matter.
I was just thinking about, you know, optimum levels, but I guess it's neither here nor there really. If it's just going to be a case of between a couple of sessions, I'm just trying to explain it to my clients why, where they've been somewhere before, they're like, oh, they've only left 6 weeks and you're leaving 12 weeks, and trying to get their head around it.
Well, I say to those clients, I can do it at 6 weeks if you like.
Yeah, I think I might.
But there'll be another 3 sessions on the end of it, guaranteed.
Yeah.
For example,
American chap said that, you know, what they do is they say after 3 sessions, they say, right, come back when you've got some hair for me to treat. Don't waste my time coming back with baldy patches, because that's not good for anybody. I thought that was quite a clever idea. And the other thing, when I was doing the modeling in this and doing all these calculations, I noticed that there are times when you'll be treating somebody and there are no hairs in anagen, or virtually no hairs in anagen. All you're treating are catagen intelligent hair. This is after maybe 5 or 6 sessions, right? Because you've killed so many anagen hairs by that point that there's very few follicles left to go into anagen, and you can easily treat somebody and none of them are an anagen. Don't tell them that, for God's sakes.
So even with the face, you'd leave 8 weeks.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest with you, the chin, you can do the chin every 4 weeks, because
I do the face differently. It's the only body part that I do different. I do the first 3 or 4 sessions every 4 weeks, because you can kill a hell of a lot of anagen hairs, because there's an awful lot on the face that's in anagen at any one time. So I do the first 3 or 4 sessions every 4 weeks, and then I say, right, let's leave it now and let's see what comes through. So we're going to leave it 8 weeks now.
that's fine. Absolutely fine. It's, you know, like I say, it just, all it does is it alters the total number of treatment sessions all in. That's all it does. Right, ladies, I've got a 2-year-old birthday party to go to, and I'm so excited.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Yeah, thank you.
Please remember, right? Do this number. You take your fluence, you multiply by the rep rate that you're choosing, and I actually recommend don't really go much above 6, because it's hard to control above 6. It's up to you. And then your total number of passes, you're trying to get somewhere about between 400 and 450, and then you do that 10 times for a 10 by 10 area, right? That's your bunch of numbers. But it's entirely up to you. I mean, if you want to do 20 joules, you can. I mean, I did that, tested it on myself, 20 joules at 6 hertz. So that's 120, and then you can do 3 or 4 passes to get you up to about 450, 480 or something like that.
Just very quickly, sorry, if you were doing an underarm, which isn't 10 centimeters, what would the maths be for that?
How big are your underarms?
Make it 10 centimeters. Just cover 10 centimeters.
Oh, okay, and just do that.
Lots of people do have, like, some people have, you know, right down. So just make it work.
The reason we choose 10 centimeters is to make sure you keep the energy locked into that area. Because if you go to like 12, 15, 20 centimeters, then you're losing it, right? So you're absolutely right. You're not going to get the 10 by 10. That's a bit kind of, but you still go for the 10 by 1 and get to something like about 400, 450, something like that, all right? And if it's only 3 strips, then fine. Then you're only doing 3 times. So it's going to be, what, about 1,500 in total, not 4,500, right? Okay.
Cool. Cheers, Mike.
Thank you.
Send you a link once it's all set to go after the party, though, right?
Don't let that Oren drink too much.
Oh, that boy can drink that. Right,
Cool. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
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 Bye.